One hears a lot, of course, I mean, these days about the sort of Tony Benn approach to the new nationalisation of workers' control. Would you like more workers' control within the coal industry, and if so, I mean, how would it work?
Well, it's fascinating you should ask the question, because it's only last week that, for the first time, we decided it's time that we make our thoughts known on worker participation. We'd never discussed it as a union. You know, we'd gone along in the knowledge that we had this good consultative machinery.
30 years of nationalisation.
Yeah, but we'd never really discussed what we really meant by worker participation, although the TUC had issued a document on worker participation. We had never as a union discussed what are our ideas on worker participation. I don't go along, say, with the German idea that worker participation means having about four on a board, 4 from the employers and 4 from somebody else. If I'm going to be part of any worker participation in the industry, responsible for the decisions which are necessary to make the industry successful, then by God, the unions have got to have a bigger say in it than that, and they've got to have a position where some of their own thoughts can carry the day, you know. And I'm not trying to sell Llew. I'm just saying that just say we'll put a couple of directors on the board. It's not worker participation for me, as it happens in the steel industry, is it? Something like that. That's not worker participation at all. In fact, it creates a false position, because those 2 workers who may be elected on the board, that's a board of 11 or 13, what are they, rubber stamp? Because that's what it can be seen, and the workers who they're supposed to represent know they have no real authority, they have no power to get their decisions accepted, so therefore they're not serving a purpose. It's just like a bit of a charade. Well, if I'm going to be involved in worker participation, it's got to be worker participation in full, where everybody in the industry is regarded as a worker. That's why I want to get a position in the pits where we have one union to represent everybody.
Colliery managers.
Yeah, all the lots.
Yes.
And then we'll elect a board to run the industry. And it won't be a silly board. It won't be taking silly decisions, because it'll have to sell coal.
Do you think this day will come, or is coming? And,
well, I think they're making progress towards it, but whether it'll come in my time, I've only, about 8 years to do as president, I don't know. Might do, Llew.
I mean, how sympathetic do you find the coal board to it? I mean,
we've never discussed it with them. We haven't as yet discussed it with them, because, as I've already indicated, we have a good consultative machinery where many of the decisions and the plans for the future development and that are discussed. Of course, the decisions finally rest with the board. Sometimes we query those decisions, and I'd like to be in there batting when decisions are being made. Just as I regret not being able at the moment to discuss what they're talking about in Europe, because we can't be in the committees there. You know, I hate to think that decisions anywhere are being made. By decision of
your union?
Oh yes,
by democratic.
I accept that.
This is democracy.
Yeah. And I regret it, but I regret sometimes not being in the board. I don't say me personally, but the union involved in the board, to be part of those decisions, to know why decisions are being made, you know, instead of just saying a second down and finding out why decisions have been made once they've been made. Sometimes it's irrevocable once decisions have been made.
I mean, you talk very highly of the machinery that exists. When I talk to men like Mr. Scargill, I find they talk about the coal board exactly as if they were just the old bosses. They don't seem to have changed their attitude to them at all. And one often wonders, in fact, whether the more militant people want workers' participation at all, because they almost seem to me to want to keep the divide.
And yet they're the ones who keep shouting about workers' control. Yeah. Well, what the hell does workers' control mean? Who's a worker? Every man who works for his living and has to rely on a monthly pay tag, is a worker somewhere. You know, and this question of workers' control, I ask myself, they're the people who shout the odds, shout the cliches, not me. These cliches that say workers' control, I'm all for workers' control if it means accepting the responsibilities that go with making management decisions. And then they're always palatable. The decisions are always good decisions. You've got to be very unpopular at times. But if that's what they mean by workers' control, then I'm all for it. I think many times we have some good brains, even when we're in my own industry, but on shop floors there's some damn good brains that don't get the chance to come through, you know, because of the setup that we're in, the whole structure that this country exists under. And I'm not talking about revert into the structure that exists in a country like, say, Russia or those other places. But I think somewhere along the line, something of that type of structure could emerge in Britain, still with a democratic with a democratic country as we know it.
Can I come back to the word militant and allow me to use it in the sense of just describing the they that you were calling about, and not let's pick hairs about who's militant and who's not militant, but the coalfields have traditionally been a sort of breeding ground for militants. How did you emerge from that breeding ground and a moderate? Or a moderate militant, if you like. How did you? No, why didn't you become, as it were, an extremist? Why did you become a more moderate man?
Well, if militancy means fighting for what you think is right, I was more militant than most people who pretend to be militants today ever were. I fought week in, week out for the wait for the job, and I usually got it.
Tell me a bit about those early days. Tell me one extraordinary story.
I was born in the mining area. You know, the whole area was just mining and cotton, coal and cotton. That was Lancashire in those days, coal and cotton. I was born, as I say, 4 miles from Wigan. Yes. Near to the pier, by the way, you know. Yeah. Fascinating this, and I knew nothing else on mining. My father and my grandfather, his brothers, my brothers, all miners. And funny enough, I married the daughter of a miner as well. He and his brothers and his fathers before him were all traditional miners, and she was the daughter of a miner, and we met and married, and we brought our kids up, and my son's a miner. I tried to persuade him not to be, by the way, but he went into the pits.
Why did you try and persuade him not to be?
Well, I thought there were better ways to live than working in the pits. I mean, so this has been, I don't think I'm anything out of the ordinary from this. I think most miners, in those days particularly, I'm not sure these days, but in those days they used to say, if I can stop my son going in the pits, then by God I'll try to do it, you see. And we tried to persuade him, but when they looked around there weren't many other jobs available, and once you got into the pits you couldn't get out. So, and you know this, and I say even in those days, 17 years of age, I was negotiating my own piecework price list. So I had to file like holy hell. I didn't bother with the union fella at the pit to help me negotiate. I negotiated my own. In fact, I think it was
sort of one-man lump.
Well, not a one-man lump. I was a member of the union.
Yes, yes.
I was a member of the union, but I didn't need the services of a branch secretary all the time to get what I thought was right. I used to get my damn self. Until we had, you know, you're trying to say what caused militancy. Yes. And why.
What created you, and when you first came in real conflict?
Well, let me just, you know, try if I could to give you some ideas to what how it would change my ideas. You know, I was working at, I think it was lime pits in those days, and I was in charge of a gang of men, in charge of a team of what we call pan shifters in those days. That's conveyor movers, you know. We used to be in the afternoon shift moving conveyors ready for the colliers in the day shift. And I was the chairman of the firm. And this day, I used to get the ticket, and I found that we were a few quid short on the ticket, you know. A few pounds in those days was a lot of money, because you didn't get much at the end of the day, you know. You didn't get much in total. When you're 4 or 5 quid between 3 years short, it's a hell of a lot of money. And we had an under manager there. I couldn't stand the sight of. And he couldn't stand the sight of me, I must admit. As soon as we used to meet walking in the pits, it was like very hackles rising on your back, you know, like a dog just hackling. So I had to go and argue with him this day. And I said, we're short of money. He says, you know? I said, of course you have. Don't be so bloody daft. I shouldn't say that, but I said, I don't know what I'm arguing with you for. I'm going to argue with the manager. And he was an old wily bird, the manager. He said, all right, Joe, leave it with me. You go to your job and get your job done. Because I told him, I said, if I don't get this money, I don't work. I don't work for any, I never work anywhere for nothing, except for charity. But I never work normally for nothing. I like being paid wages. So he said, go and get your job done and I'll see it right and come tomorrow morning. So when I went on the following morning, Saturday morning, they said, Colin, man, are you going on his holidays? I thought, yeah, you know. Well, I said, what a hell of a do. So I said to the Sunday manager, who we didn't get along very well with, I said, well, all right, mate, perhaps me and you can sort it out. Oh, I said, no, we can't. We couldn't yesterday. I said, well, listen, mate, we lost the tempers yesterday. Oh, he said, I never lose my temper. Well, you know, I could have kicked him down the stairs. I was so mad, and I was a bit young and energetic in those days, you know. I thought, Jesus, tonight, we're not getting anywhere fast here. I said, all right, mate, I lost my temper. And just because I said that, it's only a bit of an apology. He said, well, come on then. And he took me into the room and showed me where it was a clerical error in the book, and he knew it. He knew it the day before, but wouldn't tell me because of my attitude. I thought, well, Joe, that's the way you do things, by walking about with a chip on your shoulder all the time and not gaining out. Is it not better to just step back and have a look and say, well, let's have a look at this, see how we can do what we want to do. And from that day to this, I started looking at the other man's point of view and saying, well, let's have a look. Let's have an examination of the thing. Let's, you know, get to all the details and that. And I have never, since that day, looked back, except with affection for that weekend when that under manager taught me that lesson, quietly. And we became great friends after that, to such a degree that I could get payment for hard work as a chairman, more than any other chairman, because he knew I wouldn't claim anything I wasn't entitled to. And, you know, he does these sort of things along your life pattern that I think well your character. And I have a funny trait. I think the best of everybody until I'm proved wrong. And I've gone through life with their attitude in mind. And this is where I don't mind being called a moderate. But let nobody kid themselves, mate. Moderates in this life usually make more progress than those who stand on the street corners shouting all the militant slogans that exist. Because normally when you're termed a moderate, you get better respect from people. You get listened to better by people.
Who's winning the battle within the Union? Because there is a battle, isn't there? I mean, the Communist Party wants control of a powerful union. It used to hold higher official positions in it than it does now. Who is winning that ideological struggle within the NUM? The men like yourself, or the moderates, if you like to call them, the militants, or the men with the chips on their shoulders? Who's winning?
Well, I got to admit that I would think the new people who are coming into authority in the Union are more lenient to the, I won't say the militant attitude, I would just say to the ideals of the Communist Party or the left, the left. This is, when I say left, sometimes it makes me smile, when we say left, right, or centre. You're always left, right, or centre in the eyes of the beholder. Because I've been accused of being an ultra-right-wing socialist. I've also been accused of being a communist. But somewhere along the line, that's where I am, somewhere in between, and that's the thing for the majority of people. But if you're asking me, are the more politically motivated people coming to the top, then I'm going to answer, in my opinion, yes. I don't think this, in many cases, is perhaps part of a big scheme of things. I think by accident it's happening. You get areas which are were traditional moderate men and moderate leaders had a heavy bashing in the pit closure programme. For instance, you talk about the North East, where Sammy Watson was the leader for many, many years, and the Northumberland area. They had a heavy, really heavy bashing. And because of that, it's bred a different type of leader coming to the top. Inevitably, they will come to the top. The lads who think, well, we've been knocked to holy hell up by being a moderate frame of mind, let's make sure it doesn't happen again. So I think naturally this will emerge, that you will get a body of people in control of the National Union who will be thinking in that frame of mind. That doesn't mean to say that tomorrow the whole of the National Union mine workers will all be members of the Communist Party. I don't think that's going to be a possibility. But it is a fact that there are some members of the Communist Party who are on the National Executive Committee. I think there's about 8 or 7 or 8. We have 1 or 2 pro-Marxist, but not members of the Communist Party. We have others who are members of the Labour Party. We have others who I wouldn't guarantee are politically aligned one way or the other. So we have a mixed bag, and it's fine. You have to try to weld them all together to get a common platform. It's not easy.
What do you think the communists are after in the Union? I mean, are they just after a different road to your end, or are they after something else in there when they seek union offers?
Well, I think if they when they're working industrially, we have the same ends. That's to get the best conditions, the best wages, working conditions, living conditions for the same members that everybody represents. So I think industrially there's no difference of emphasis. But if they're worth the salt as politicians, then they will be trying in their own way to get the union to follow the pattern of the decision of the Communist Party through the block vote system in the trade union movement. And the block vote system controls some of the policies of the Labour Party in many ways. I'd be stupid not to say that, because everybody knows it's a fact. So they may be trying in their own ways to get control of the unions for that very fact. Knowing they can't win on a ballot in the country, knowing they have never been very successful in elections, there is a possibility to get many of their ideas accepted by the Labour Party and therefore become the policy of the government. But let nobody always just cry wolf at that, because many of the ideals of the Communist Party in most of the countries that I know are ideals that are good for people. I'm not talking about the political dogma that denies freedom of speech and all that, but I'm talking about many of the social ideas they had. You know, the social priorities. And I don't think the people of Britain should run like holy hell because the Communist Party might be trying to get some of these ideas accepted by the Labour movement. I don't worry too much on this issue at all, because it happens that many of their ideas I've left behind years ago. They're not far enough. They're not far enough advanced. You know, their approach to many things is not as advanced as my own ideas.
In what way? Can you give me an example of that?
Well, I'll give you a real example as to why I think some of their ideas, the British Communist Party, I'm not talking about the Communist Party, the British Communist Party in general, most of their pressure or most of their publicity seems to be sheltered around this continual cry for dispute. You know, as if you can solve all problems by having everybody out on the street and try to solve the problems that way. Now, I think this is the worst form of leadership. And in fact, the Italian Communist Party, which is the biggest in Western Europe, is really the driving force behind the housing programs, the road programs, the education programs. They've taken over the role that used to be once the role of the Social Democrats and the ordinary socialists in a country like Italy. And I was in a delegation to Romania from the British Labour Party, and I was introduced as an ultra-right-wing socialist to Ceausescu. That's what I was meaning a little earlier on. And because I'm a bit short-tempered, you know, although I'm a moderate, you see, I'm a bit short-tempered many times on certain things.
Moderate.
No, maybe that. No, not bad-tempered.
Or moderately bad-tempered?
No, a quick-tempered sometimes, moderate. There's a slight difference. And I was going to say something to the person who said it, and then the ambassador said, no. All right. We spent 2 hours in discussing with Ceausescu, who was the leader of not only the Communist Party, but also the president of the country, Prime Minister of the country. And at the end of 2 hours, I said to him, now it's fascinating. I was introduced to you as an ultra-right-wing socialist. That you and I are arguing exactly the same way as to how we will deal with the economic problems facing us. That tells me that there's a moral in this somewhere.
Is it therefore only your Catholicism that stops you being a communist?
Never even enters my head. My religion never enters my head. I'm a Catholic. I go to church when I feel like it. I'm not one of those Catholics who, I don't know, maybe a lot of people think and be scandalized what I'm going to say. I don't think it proves you're a better or worse Catholic because you run to church every day in the week or, go to communion, confession, God knows what. I don't think it makes you any better Catholic. I think you're a better Catholic or a better Christian in the way you act during your life. If you go along through life trying to do best for your fellow people, not setting out deliberate to do something that you know will injure people, if you work in that way, if you carry your life on in that way, then I think you can still be termed a good Catholic without having to run to church every morning. I go when I feel like it. But it never at any time enters my head to do a thing because I'm a Catholic. Sometimes it doesn't enter my head to do a thing because I'm a Labour Party member either. My driving force many times is, first of all, the job I'm doing, which is an important job. It's a job I like doing. And if you like doing the job, then that in itself is a lot of personal satisfaction. And on the other hand, I like the fact that in this job you can, many ways, to help to determine policies which will be good in Britain if governments will accept them and act upon them. It gives you that added impetus as well. So that's the way I look at things and the way that I react to things. And if I'm a moderate mate, I don't mind. I keep saying this to a lot of people. Call me a moderate all you want. What makes a difference to me.
But what you said earlier on, I think you said in answer to my question that the communists or the left were in fact winning the battle within the NUM. That will alarm a lot of people.
Why should it?
Should they be, are they right to be alarmed?
I don't think they're right to be alarmed if those same people that we're talking about, say the members of the Communist Party, get in control and do the job industrially. Nobody needs to be worried at all. If they use their political side of life,
But
and their political
if they'd been in control today, Joe, they could have voted for rejection and for a recommendation of strike action, couldn't they?
Of course they could.
I mean, that's what it means, doesn't it? That's
well,
what
of
people
course
are
they
afraid of.
could. I very much doubt whether they would have done if they were in control. I very much doubt whether they would have done if they'd been in control, because people react in certain ways when they're in opposition, or when they get in the majority, they have to react differently. I don't think it should be too alarmed, although I fought against the ideology of communism all my political life because I don't like what I've seen in communist countries. Not because I disbelieve many of the ideas that they have. It's only the question of implementation of them. And the worst examples, or the worst sort of publicists in Britain for communism are the British Communist Party. That to me is a fact of life. If I was an outsider looking in and thinking about politics, I wouldn't be enamoured about joining the British Communist Party. Let's forget out whether I was a member of the Labour Party or not.
Do they interfere in the affairs of your union from outside? I mean, you once complained
Well,
about
I think
the
they did.
activities of
I
Mr.
think they did
Ramilson.
once. I think they did once.
You think you warned them
well,
off?
well, I think they did once. And I had this discussion with Ramilson before, on this. He said he has the right. I said, of course you have the right to do what the hell you want, but don't interfere with my negotiations. I'm not being political when I'm negotiating on behalf of the NUM. I'm being Joe Gormley, the president of the NUM. Not because I'm a member of the Labour Party, because I'm president of the NUM. And I want all of the members of the executive look at it in this way. Whether they're members of this party or that party is not important. It's a question of what you think is right for the members of the NUM. Then after that, well, all right, I talk about politics after that. And I think a lot, there has been some interference, but this was a flagrant example of it. When political speeches have been made on political platforms during the election period, at a time when we're in negotiations, and this was the worrying feature that I said about it. Although I don't mind people members of the Communist Party. I'd rather people said they're members of the Communist Party than pretend they're not.
Bringing us full circle, you mentioned the disputes. The events of the last week within the Tory party really remind us all that Mr. Heath's downfall started with the dispute with the miners. Did you rejoice in his downfall this week, in his final downfall?
No. You see, you look back 12 months and you try to see mistakes people have made. I personally, on behalf of the NUM, about this time last year, might have been a fortnight ago, like 12 months, I offered them about 4 different formulas which they could act upon, and any one of them they've acted upon, or could have brought a cash response, would have settled the dispute. Any one of them. Till the NEC told me, Joe, you have done enough. You've done your best. You've tried to help to solve the problem. They're not reacting, so to hell with them. And I had to say exactly the same. Now, to think that if any one of those had been picked up by Ted Heath, he could still have been Prime Minister today of Britain. So I didn't rejoice in him being defeated by Margaret Thatcher or anybody. It's not my nature to just have spite for people. I just say I was a bit sorry perhaps that his advisors behind him didn't allow him to use his own common sense. I think he was ill-advised, and I think there were one or two tough men behind him who were advising him, oh, we're on a winner here. If we get in conflict with the miners and we go to the country, we're inevitably bound to win. Well, they didn't understand politics.
You've no... I mean, did not Mr. McGarchy, in fact, tell him at Downing Street one day, we will finish you?
The same, no, that's not true.
No.
At the meeting, there was a talk about politics, and I said, I'm a member of the Labour Party. So you know where I stand. We're not here to talk about governments or what have you. If you talk about what the country is, and that's it, it's your opinion. You're the Prime Minister, you'll decide when you go to the country. If you go to the country, then I shall work like holy hell to defeat you. And Mick came in, he says, and I can tell you this. He said, I don't like a Tory government, and I shall try to defeat you, but it will be through the ballot box. But of course, that was set out somewhere that he'd threatened the Prime Minister that his only function in that dispute was to try to destroy the government, and it's not a fact. He was quoted out of context entirely. He's exactly a political animal like I am. I won't work on behalf of the Tory party at any time, any election, or the Liberals, or even the Communists. I'll work like holy hell for the Labour Party until I leave it. That's not likely to be. I tried to change the policy of the Labour Party, but I don't think I'd ever leave it. And therefore, he was misquoted, and this was doing disservice to what we were negotiating about. We were negotiating about wages.
What I'm suggesting to you is that you're surely a little less than human if this week you didn't say, well, let's serve the so-and-so right. No?
No, whether I'm less a human than not, I didn't see that at all, and I don't see it that way at all, because the difficulty of having just saying that is that you turn around and say, well, we really did it for political purposes, but we didn't. They raised the politics of the issue, not us. Because the frightening feature behind a philosophy that we would be glad when this thing happened and what have you is that we turn and say, well, if we don't like any government, we might react the same. And I don't think that's true. We never set out to create that impression at all, and I hope people in Britain will never accept that we started out on that basis at all. We wanted a settlement of the dispute, and some politicians thought it would be a stamping ground or a platform, election platform that they could jump off on. Well, history has changed in Britain, hasn't it, as a result of that miscalculation.
Can we come full circle in the last 5 minutes to the social contract? Do you believe...
Where's that come from again?
do you believe... Remember it. Do you believe that the social contract will continue in its present form, or that sooner or later the government are going to have to put sharper edges to it, and that you won't be able to blur it so easily as you have certainly blurred it today?
Well, I hope not. I hope not, because it's never worked.
I've heard that speech before. Do you think... the question was, do you think they will have to?
No, I don't think they will have to. As I said when I was talking to you earlier, whether we like it or not, even during our negotiations, behind your mind all the time as a negotiator is the fact that the TUC have a policy and you try to work to it as much as possible. There has to be a voluntary approach to things, and we tried to get our involuntary approach in our negotiations this week without being adamant it was this or that or the other. In fact, we put figures in that we came away from quite a lot. And I think to introduce something that would be a statutory, it could only be a statutory issue, would be fatal to the labour movement. The freeze, which Harold Wilson introduced in those years, was a complete calamity. Because if you introduce a freeze or statutory sort of marks down, you get everybody thinking that if that statutory regulation wasn't there or the freeze wasn't there, I would have a wage increase. And of course it's not a fact. Wage increases don't come like that. And to lay the law down and say you will only get this or you'll only get that makes people rebel automatically. And you never get the response that I say we need to get from British industry, because the workers will say, ta-ta, we are not interested.
So we just go on with the social contract in its present form without any change, you think? I mean, looking ahead, how do you don't you think that it's going to have to change in some way? The TUC is going to toughen it up, isn't it?
I don't know why people should say this, because we've settled, and people, you've said it's blurred the edges. I have not disagreed that we've stretched a little bit. I don't see any reason why the social contract shouldn't be kept as it is in its present form, carrying with it as it does a lot of voluntary ability to negotiate. People should realise that, what I said earlier, 70% of the NUM are underground miners. There's nobody can deny the fact that they're a unique crowd of people, that you can't relate them to anybody else. They're underground miners. They work at the pit bottom and further in by. So that 70% of our negotiations could be treated all the time. We'll always have to be treated differently than other workers in Britain. Now those on the surface,
How long before we see the £100 a week miner?
I hope not too long. I hope not too long, because they already have in America the £120 a week miner. They have in West Germany the £80 a week miner.
How long is not too long?
Well, I never forecast the future too far in advance.
Wage claim after next, or?
I would hope if we can get the production up to the levels we need to get up to, say, Britain, the £100 a week miner with a production bonus will be a lot nearer than people think.
Do you think the miners will ever lose? I mean, they have in the past always had a lot of public goodwill. Do you think they'll ever lose that if they become £100 a week men, relatively well paid in relation to the rest of the working class? Do you think they'll lose that goodwill?
Well, there's a lot in what I can see behind the question, what you're getting at. There has always been this certain relationship between the public and the miners. It may have been because of the attitude which the miners faced many years ago, when they were going underground and they were treated like slaves, and there was always this public sympathy when anything happened, and there always will when there's been a tragedy. It may be when they get to this wage level that the public may have a different approach, but I hope not. Miners won't deliberately set out to sever the public at all, at any time. In fact, they never have tried to do that.
In the last half minute, the miners have always had this exalted place in working class struggle, both perhaps in fact and perhaps in myth. What role do you see them playing in the years ahead?
Well, I see them playing a more active role in the annals of the trade union movement and labour movement than they did in those, I think, years, the 15, between 50 and 60, and I think we're going to have this militant role. When I say militant role, a more positive role.